Elm's a functional programming language. It compiles to JavaScript. So it's basically if you want to make reliable, delightful web apps.
At NoRedInk, it was actually my first time using Elm, and I can confirm that it has been a delight to write in.
Now that you've been doing it for a few months, do you miss writing JavaScript?
I really don't. I don't miss writing JavaScript at all. I mean, when I first started writing Elm, it felt a little bit like wearing a straitjacket in comparison to the free-for-all that is JavaScript.
Knowing what I do about Elm, this project would have gone a lot better, would have gotten done faster, the result would have been more maintainable if we'd done it in Elm.
When you come up to something that's not been solved in Elm, what's your approach?
I usually try to write something new. It's kind of an exciting opportunity.
Hey, this is Brian, and you're listening to JAMstack Radio, a bi-weekly series where we discuss the JAMstack, a new way of building websites and apps that are fast, secure, and simple to work with. JAMstack Radio is brought to you by Heavybit, a program dedicated to helping startups take their developer products to market. For more information, visit heavybit.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. Welcome to another installment of JAMstack Radio. In the room, we've got Brooke, Angel.
That's me.
Cool. Awesome. And then the other side of the room, we've got Richard Feldman.
How's it going?
Cool. So I have you guys here to talk about Elm, basically. Elm. Actually, Richard, what is Elm?
So Elm's a functional programming language. It compiles to JavaScript. So it's basically if you want to make reliable, delightful web apps. So it focuses on two things. One is user experience, so having a really nice experience when you're the developer building stuff. And two is reliability. So the compiler has sort of famous for catching problems before they can reach your end users. And we've actually recently crossed the milestone of 100,000 lines of Elm code in production. And since that, we introduced it in 2015. And since then, the entire time we've had it in production, which is almost 2 years now, it still has not thrown a single runtime exception. Our Elm code hasn't.
Cool. And then would you say in production, sorry, we didn't preface this, you guys are both from the same company, NoRedInk?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So when you say in production, you're talking about NoRedInk, not just not just a world.
Right. Although I should add that I've actually talked to quite a few other companies using it in production, and that's always the first question I ask them is how many runtime exceptions have you gotten? Still, the grand total is 0 across all of them.
Cool. That's
not just us.
Yeah, that's good to know because I know JavaScript is really famous for its runtime errors. It's very descriptive runtime errors. So how did you guys approach, why Elm and NoRedInk, and why are you an Elm programmer, I guess?
Yeah, so I guess I can talk to that. So I signed on to NoRedInk a long time ago, about 3.5 years ago, and back then this was before React came out. And basically, we had a bunch of different stuff going on with our stack. And when React came out, we're like, this is really cool. Let's adopt this. And we kind of started using React. It sort of took over our front end. And then I'd been doing some Elm on the side, just kind of, as on a side project and really liking it, being really impressed. And we had this one project that took a long time. And I kind of realized after we did the project, wow, knowing what I do about Elm, this project would have gone a lot better, would have gotten done faster. The result would have been more maintainable if we'd done it in Elm. I feel like I kind of made a mistake by not even trying to introduce it. So basically what I did was I just started introducing it to one small part of one page, and then it just, we got that into production. It kind of grew from there. And now today it's sort of just taken over our whole front end, and it's pretty much what all of our front end folks spend all their time doing.
Cool. And then speaking of those front end folks, Brooke, I just wanted to ask, so I talked off mic, off podcast about, I wanted to know your background because I know now you write Elm. So I'm very intrigued about your background coming to NoRedInk and then your experience writing Elm today.
Yeah, totally. I'd be excited to talk about that. So I'm actually pretty new to NoRedInk, and I just started working there in January.
Okay.
And before I started there, I attended one of those newfangled programming boot camps.
Oh, I've heard of those.
One of those. And back at that programming boot camp, we were writing React, JavaScript, and learning a bit of Rails. So I had a bit of experience with React. After the boot camp, I spent a while working there as a TA, during which a lot of my job was to trace down student errors in in React and JavaScript. So when I started working at NoRedInk, it was actually my first time using Elm, and I can confirm that it has been a delight to write in.
Cool. And then, so you're doing it full time at the moment?
Yeah. So far, I've been working mostly on front end stuff, so full time Elm.
So you're writing front end code.
Uh-huh.
It goes through a compiler.
Yeah.
and then that compiler then produces JavaScript code. So walk me through the steps of how the compiler works, and then what converts the Elm to JavaScript.
So the compiler does both of those things, basically. You write, so Elm has, so there's a bunch of different compiled to JavaScript languages. So you got Babble, TypeScript, things like that, CoffeeScript. Elm's different from those in that it has completely separate semantics from JavaScript. So like CoffeeScript is like, we're going to take JavaScript and we're going to clean up a few things. TypeScript is like, we're going to take JavaScript and add types. Elm's like, we're a totally different language. JavaScript is just the bytecode. We're just going to compile to that. And so what that means is that basically it's got this freedom to innovate on this like language design. So JavaScript is sort of like famously thrown together in like 2 weeks or something like that. Whereas Elm's been sort of like more carefully designed. So part of the language design is trying to make it so that more things can be caught by the compiler. So like you don't have problems with null or undefined because the language doesn't have null or undefined. Instead, it has these different constructs that let you express the same idea, but in a way where the compiler can really easily check and verify that you're not forgetting to check for the possibility of a value being missing, things like that.
Yeah. I had a follow-up question, but I completely forgot what it was going to be. I had a joke. So you guys are using, you didn't talk about what NoRedInk is. So do you want to explain that real quick so I can make my joke?
Sure.
So NoRedInk is a program that is used in a lot of school for kids to learn grammar.
Okay.
So an example of a lesson that we would have would be a kid could learn punctuation by dragging commas to the correct place in a sentence.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, did you have a follow-up for that?
Now we've gotten into writing too.
Yeah.
So used to be just grammar, but now it's both.
Cool. So you guys are compiling errors and exposing those. So with Elm, is that why you guys are such big fans? Because you're really, really into grammar and error checking? Has no one ever thought of that correlation before?
Yeah, I think you're the first, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I've got your marketing pitch for you.
Well, languages do all have to do with grammar, so it fits that we're using a nice language.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And then, did you have like coding experience before your boot camp and then going into NoRedInk, or is it all through the boot camp?
I did. I took one intro to programming class in college, and this was back when I was studying neurobiology, and I was contemplating learning coding to help me with my research. So I knew some MATLAB beforehand.
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea what MATLAB is, but it sounds fancy.
It's used for sciencey things.
Okay. Cool. So you came in with no experience other than your boot camp, and then day one you started writing Elm code?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I guess technically day one I got my environment configured. Days 2 through 5 I was sick with the flu, and then day 6 I started writing Elm code.
Okay. Well, within roughly a couple of weeks, you're writing code, that's actually phenomenal. Like I think that's really awesome. And so I don't have a lot of Elm experience. We do a little bit of Elm at Netlify, which I've been tinkering around with, trying to help out with, which I've not done as of yet because I'm way too busy. But I do have experience with like types. Coming from like a Go, which is not as strongly typed. But with that being said, I have experience with working with types and having a compiler that it actually makes it easier for me to learn Go code that way. So I think if I ever like finally like read Richard's book and then actually contribute code to my project, then hopefully I'll have the same experience. So I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm actually excited to eventually contribute to that.
Yeah, totally.
For show.
Nice.
Cool. And then, so when you guys say front end Elm, like, are you guys can you basically do anything in Elm that you can do in the front end? So like style stuff, animations, et cetera, et cetera. Or is there basically what I'm asking, is there any limitations to choosing Elm as your front end as far as accomplishing modern front end stuff?
I mean, I'd say, so there's some stuff where we do JavaScript interop. There's like two kind of broad categories where we want to do that. One is there's some huge JavaScript library that nobody's written an Elm equivalent of. The example that is coming to mind is the date picker that we're still using. But there actually are Elm date pickers. We just haven't bothered to switch to them yet. Haven't gotten around to it, I should say. And the other is just that, so Elm has this kind of unique philosophy of sort of exposing like a baseline API, sort of a wrapper around the web platform. And not all of that is covered yet. So the biggest example of this is probably like local storage, like local persistence. Like there aren't APIs for doing that in Elm yet.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that stuff, you have to do JavaScript interop. Obviously, over time, that's getting smaller and smaller, and the goal is that eventually it'll just be Elm all the things. But I think for the indefinite future, I mean, if you want to get a big JavaScript library that it does not exist in Elm, like Google Maps comes immediately to mind. Like nobody's ever going to rewrite Google Maps in Elm. I think I'm pretty confident that's going to be the case. So for stuff like that, I think you're always going to be doing JavaScript. But at least my experience has been that you can pretty much have Elm be as much as possible, and then it's sort of JavaScript just for the very rare cases where you just need that ecosystem.
Yeah, I'd say so far with what I'm doing, I haven't really encountered any hurdles.
Yeah.
So I think didn't you just do JavaScript interop for the first time like a month ago?
Oh yeah, I guess I did.
It was that easy, huh?
Yeah, I think what were we working on? We were working on a little banner that would scroll down from the top when you scroll down to a certain point in the page. And I think there was no Elm package to detect that yet. So we did a little JavaScript interop.
How long had you been at the company at that point?
Say a month.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's not bad. Well, I mean, yeah, we're only a few months away from your probably start date. So you got like 3 or 4 months into...
I think just coming up on 3 months. Yeah, cool. 3 months into the Elm forest.
So when you come up to something like that, where you, for example, I don't know if you guys have a moment version. That was what I was coming to mind, like maybe a moment library, because I always reach for that, and I know it's huge, but I'm like, I just want to do this one thing in moment, so I'll install the entire project. So like something as simple as that, when you come up to something that's not been solved in Elm, like what's your approach to solving that? Do you first go to interop, or do you go to like, maybe we should write something new?
I usually try to write something new.
Yeah.
it's kind of an exciting opportunity if it's something manageable, right? So Moment.js, of course, is like an enormous date manipulation library, but probably what you need, like you said, is just like one small part of it. So as it happens, there's already a date library out there, but you can always like either contribute to that, if nobody's written the exact function you need, or just start a new package if it's something where nobody's done any work on it yet. But it is kind of cool just to be able to like fill a gap in the open source ecosystem. Whereas in JavaScript, a lot of the time it seems like, all the really useful gaps are kind of already filled, and it's just sort of like opportunities are really just like around the edges to make a meaningful contribution sometimes.
I know, obviously, NoRedInk uses Elm. Are there other companies out there using Elm in production that have as many lines out there as you guys that are supporting the language as well?
Pretty sure we got the most.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anybody having as many as we do as far as lines of code go. But I talk to companies on a pretty regular basis that are like, and I'm surprised because I don't know where they came from. Like a lot of the times they're just, sort of like off the radar. Like they don't really participate in like community discussions or like Slack or, message boards or anything. But then they'll just be like, oh yeah, we have 20,000 lines of Elm code. I'm like, who are you? How long have you been like that?
Yeah, that's our experience as well. Like we don't have 20,000 lines at all. Like we maybe have 30 or 40 lines of Elm code in production. But we've got basically 2 separate projects that are using Elm within our ecosystem at Netlify. And it just happened to be our CTO who really wanted to learn it and really wanted to do something in production. And he's not a fan of JavaScript. So he's actually a Go programmer, and he's very into all that ecosystem and backend infrastructure. And so he's like, I just want to build this one thing to solve our problem. And basically our problem, I'll explain it because I'm sure the listener's probably curious. Netlify, we host websites. That's simple what we do, basically. But when you deploy a deploy preview, like on a GitHub PR, you can click that preview and see a live version of all your changes that are in your PR. Really cool. Not really cool when you do a blog post and it shows up on Hacker News. So we basically added an Elm project as like a context recorder. And so every time you're on a deploy preview or not production in our app, not a lot of people use it outside of us. We're still tinkering with it. But it will tell you exactly, this is not live code. This is actually on this PR and this commit. So click here to see changes. Click here to go see the PR. Super valuable, very helpful, especially when we have like support tickets and like, hey, we solved that problem. We haven't deployed the blog post yet. So here's a link. And that's basically what happened. Someone took a link from our support ticket and was like, oh, this is so awesome. Hacker News, front page. And like, oh, no, don't do that. So now we have basically a warning that says this is where you can see the code. Super straightforward. I actually read through the code the night that I met with you. I was able to really grok and understand exactly what was going on. I didn't have any idea of what to do with it, but since we actually do have it into like a Webpack plugin too, so it's called Context Recorder. So if you look for the Context Recorder Webpack plugin, you can just drop that into your Webpack config, and then if you're using Netlify, it will know to put that up on the bar for you. So super straightforward, but also it's like also I wanted to bring up that the fact that you guys converted, if I sounded right, you guys converted your, I guess, previously React app into now Elm piece by piece.
Yeah.
So how did it? Because I know Elm is like this. It's not infrastructure. It's got like its own ecosystem. So did you guys like? How did you approach that? Did you build like small Elm apps similar to what I just explained here and there, and then eventually you found out that this was an Elm app, like altogether?
I think it was more just that. So initially we used it just kind of for one part of one page, but then it was sort of like, okay, we're making a new page. We liked that small bit we did before. Let's make the whole new page in Elm, and then okay, the one after that in Elm, and we've got a designer now, so we'll redo this other page. When we redo it, let's redo it in Elm. And sort of it was, I guess, more like one page at a time, for the most part, than one part of one page, except for at the very beginning.
Okay, yeah, I like the approach. I mean, I'm a React developer at the moment. We read our code in React today. But I like that we could transition. We transitioned from Angular to React in the summer. And I like that we could take per pages and just render those React, which was totally fine. And I like the approach that we could pick a problem and solve that in Elm and then throw that in our production build.
Exactly.
Which is super straightforward. I like that approach, and I like that there's a way for someone new to step into Elm and give it a try. I think I'm not sure where I heard it from, but things like, I think we wanted to attempt it, but we didn't do it yet. But like the credit card modal, like when you enter the credit card, like you want to make sure those are like type checked. Like you don't want to just randomly put like SQL commands in where you should be adding like credit card numbers. Not ideal. I think most credit card forms they protect from that, but just something small like that where you could it's a modal, throw Elm on there, or it's a context bar, throw Elm on there, and just see how it works.
Definitely validate that one on your back end too.
yeah. Obviously, yeah. Well, JAMstack, we're very big in the API, so obviously we'd use Braintree or Stripe or something. But cool. And then, so I guess rolling into that, like if I wanted to start Elm today, like I really want to scratch an itch. I like what was talked about. Like what sort of things would I go through to figure that out?
Oh, goodness. Well, I guess I did this recently.
Yeah.
Well, one way to do it is to dive into a code base that's largely Elm on the front end and to just start hacking at that.
We're hiring if you'd like to do that.
Oh, yeah, we are hiring. The way that I did it mostly outside of just working in our code base was working through the Elm tutorial. And from there, seeing
that elmtutorial.org?
Is that elmtutorial.org?
So the official guide is it's guide.elm-lang.org.
Okay.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, and I started off by working through a few of those tutorials, and they start off pretty easy, like get a button to render on the page, get a button to increment a counter, things like that. And then once you've worked through a couple of those, it becomes easier to start working on your own small projects. My
approach that I've had so far, every 6 months, I basically relearn the syntax. And then now I actually have a project to look at work. So it's actually a lot easier to stay consistent on that. Well, not really. I haven't been consistent with my Elm at all. But it was really nice to actually go through the code and actually walk through and figure out what was going on as far as the project I mentioned. So super cool. And then Richard, you also have a book as well?
That's true, yeah. Elm in Action from Manning Publications. It's in early access right now, so you can get about half of it. I'm still writing the second half. Also, Front End Masters. There's a 2-day Elm workshop that I did for them, which is actually more complete than the book at this point. So happy to recommend both of those.
Yeah, cool. And I know there's like Elm conferences or meetups, at least outside the U.S., across the country. Like, does it seem like the community is kind of picking up at least?
Yeah, it's great. So last year we had our first conference, which was in St. Louis, was attached to Strangeloop. So that was Elm Conf. And then next we have Elm Europe in Paris in June. And then also Elm Conf is also going to be attached to Strangeloop again next year. So yeah, really exciting to have gone from just like the first Elm meetup I went to in San Francisco was like, wow, almost 3 years ago now. And it was like 15 people. And now I just went to one in London that was about 100 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really growing. It's cool.
Cool. And my introduction to Elm was when you were on one of the podcasts, either JavaScript Jabber or Ruby Rogues, one of the two. And you talked about your approach to the meetup. Well, not you, but whoever started the meetup. And
Evan.
Yeah. So the meetup itself is like, actually, do you want to explain kind of how the meetup structure is?
Okay, yeah, sure. So basically, the way we do it is kind of a hack night format. So we don't do talks. Instead, what we do is basically people show up, and if you've got some project you're working on, we just kind of go around and say, hey, who's got projects? Just give us a 30-second pitch of like what you're working on and see if anyone wants to compare with you on it. Then we always have some number of people who are sort of brand new and want to just kind of get a quick intro. Then we have some number of people who just kind of want to have discussions about various things, collaborate with people. So it's like a very laid back, just kind of free flowing, just like fun way to come build stuff. So I think in the early days, Evan, sort of did talks like a lot of meetups do. And he was like, well, but people aren't really building things. And I really want to just give people time to build stuff and learn from, others. And so ever since he switched to that format, it's been kind of what we stuck with, and it's been working out really well.
Yeah, and I like it too because, like, for example, and I met you at the last meetup. I was able to share the code that my CTO wrote with the guy that was sitting next to me, and I was able to explain it and then talk through it and like get feedback on like how to approach it or how cool it was or how cool it wasn't. And then I was able to actually figure out like what everybody else is working on too. So I think one of the biggest problems like trying to learn a new language or a new framework is like I have no idea what to build. Like there's enough to do apps out there that you don't need one more Elm to do app. But it's really interesting. I met one guy a year ago who was building a chat. He worked at Zendesk. I doubt it's actually in production at the moment, but he seemed like he was going off on his own world to build this chat app in Zendesk, so similar to Intercom, basically.
Yeah, I know Zendesk is either already or about to be using Elm in production.
Oh, maybe? Oh, yeah. I assume maybe
I don't know if it's that project, but
that would actually be really cool. Very serendipitous. But yeah, he showed me that project, and I was just like, wow, this makes so much sense. And I was pretty much sold until a year ago when I tried it again because I forgot about it. Very cool. And then I guess follow up to your experience, Brooke. Now that you've been doing it for a few months, like, do you miss like writing JavaScript?
I really don't. I don't miss writing JavaScript at all. I mean, when I first started writing Elm, it felt a little bit like wearing a straitjacket in comparison to the free-for-all that is JavaScript. And I had sort of a hard time grasping the whole type system. But now that I've been writing it for a while, I feel pretty comfortable using it. And it's just very nice to not be constantly encountering runtime errors.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, unless you guys have anything else you want to add about Elm or anything else, when's Strange Loop actually? Summertime?
September. So okay. Elm Europe is in June in Paris, and then Elm Conf will be in September. I forget what date, but it's online.
Cool. Hopefully I'll have a project to share by then. I'll submit a CFP.
Nice.
Cool. Well, with that being said, we'll go ahead and roll into jam picks. These things you're jamming on, stuff that really gets you going while you're coding or not coding like me and doing podcasts. So anyway, so I'll go first. And my first pick, and also if you guys have extra picks to add on to this, because I didn't mention that they don't have to be technical picks. They can be fun picks as well. Technical picks are fun, but I just don't want to distinguish that you had to do a coding pick. But I say that because my first pick is the hot bar at Whole Foods. Actually, just hit that up on the way in. I am actually doing a vegan diet for the week. So it's just, I like to challenge myself. And I am nowhere near a vegan, like never been a vegan. But I'm trying really hard to do it. And I had nothing to eat. And my wife's out of town. So I got a whole bunch of bananas. So I had 2 of those for breakfast. And I had to come in here to get something to eat. So I'm like, oh, where can I go? And I rode my bike in, so I was like, oh, Whole Foods is on the way. So I went there and just looked like for anything that did not have milk or cheese or anything like that. And I was like, oh, cool, I can eat all this. So it was a very quick snack, and I didn't have to think too hard. Coincidentally, I do have a vegetarian Chinese food restaurant near my house in Rockridge in the East Bay. So I don't want to pick it because I think their food's horrible. But I do have options if I do get desperate. And In addition to that, I also want to pick the context recorder, which is a Webpack plugin that uses Elm. So if you do use Netlify as your hosting provider, definitely check that out so that way you don't have problems like we did. And also play.netlify.com. It's a playground it's written in Elm, and it's written to test redirects and also header things as well. So if you wanted to ever test like if redirects work, we actually have a redirects feature in Netlify. So if you wanted to test it out, it's in our documentation, netlify/docs, if you want to check it out as well. Cool. And Brooke, did you have a pick for us?
Yeah. Although first, commenting on the vegan diet thing, I too recently became a vegan a couple of months ago, or a fake vegan anyways. And so I've been having to revise all my recipes to be vegan inclusive.
Okay.
And yeah, would love to talk to you about that later. But anyways, my pick for the week. So I also recently got into carpentry around the same time that I got into this whole vegan diet thing. And I've been attempting to build all sorts of things. And the first thing I built was this workbench, which was like setting up my environment. And that was pretty difficult. It was my first carpentry project ever, and it didn't turn out great. But just yesterday, I finished my second big project, which was this nice shoe rack shelf type of ordeal. And I'm super, super excited about it. It took me like 4 weeks longer than I expected it to.
Well, that's pretty much how code is.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Lots of parallels.
I keep thinking about it in terms of parallels to code. And I have this problem when I code where I don't think about what I'm doing in advance. And so I'll just code. And then I'll sort of run into a problem and be like, should have planned for that. And it was sort of the same type of thing with my shelf where I thought it through most of the way. And then there were these certain pieces that I didn't know how to arrange, like the tabletop of this shelf. And so I got to that point, I was like, oh crap, like I don't even know how to attach this thing. But eventually after some screw placement, I managed to attach the top of the table, and everything turned out great. And now I have a very fancy shoe rack that I made, and everything is awesome.
Wow. That reminds me of the tweets that go around all the time. That's like unit testing versus like integration testing, and how they have a bunch of pictures of like people building stuff, and they're just like epic fails that don't work because they unit tested each part. Anyway, that's the first thing that popped in my mind.
If you're going to build a shelf, think it through the whole way before you start just screwing things on.
Cool.
Lessons learned.
Do you have I'm curious, do you have like a space where you actually do your carpentry, or do you do this like in your apartment or whatever?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to find a house with a garage, so it's become the workshop.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I also have a house with garage.
Garages are great.
I don't do any carpentry, though. I'm sorry. Richard, you have any picks for us?
Yeah, I got one. So this is Serge Teaches Mandarin. So I've been attempting to learn Mandarin Chinese, and so far I know almost nothing about it.
Success.
Work in progress. But yeah, I thought this is a pretty cool way to learn it. He has like an interesting first, it's basically this sort of short podcast format where he just sort of like talks you through a lesson and like pauses so that you can say the word back and stuff like that. It's been a really long time since I learned a language, like since I guess middle school was the last time that I tried to pick one up. So maybe this is just par for the course for everybody, but so far I found it useful. It's really a weird mental shift trying to wrap my head around some of the concepts. Like one of the first lessons is he talks about like the word ma, but he says that like there are 4 different ways to say it, and all of them like have different meanings. So it's like ma, 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 and all 4 of those mean different things just based on the different tones that you use to say it. And this is very alien to me because like in English, you can have different tones and maybe it means you're being sarcastic versus something else, but it doesn't actually mean a different word, right?
Yeah.
Usually. So that's been an interesting shift to sort of deal with. And my buddy Serge has been helping me out with that. Cool.
And actually, do you see any parallels in learning an actual talking language to programming languages?
I guess there's the mindset shift probably has some parallel with like FP versus OO. So one of the things that I've seen a lot of beginners in Elm have to like kind of come to grips with is, especially as you're scaling applications, when you're like, Elm doesn't have a component system. It doesn't have objects. So like if you're used to scaling using those concepts, it's like kind of a different thing to deal with one atomic, notion of application state and how to scale that just using functions. And turns out there are plenty of good ways to do it, but they're non-obvious if you're, really comfortable and familiar with the object-oriented way.
Yeah. I think I always, every time I learn a new language, I always think, because I'm same with you, I learned Spanish in high school.
Yep.
Coincidentally, my family is actually half of it is from Cuba. So I grew up hearing Spanish, but not really ever attempting to speak it. But every time I pick up a new language, I always try to find those parallels. Like, okay, well, I know in Ruby you can do this, so in JavaScript you can do this, and then Elm you can't do it. And then, so I basically find those parallels to be able to find my bearings at least. So I'm very intrigued. I'm going to Europe this summer, so I'm going to try to. I'm not sure what language I'm going to try to hone in on because I'm going to go to a couple different places. But I want to attempt speaking the native language while I'm out there. So who knows? It might be Spanish because I'm lazy. Because I already know a little bit. So cool. Well, guys, thanks for coming in to the studio all the way down the street.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience, Brooke, about approaching the language of Elm as a new programmer, at least, and bringing your expertise, Richard, as well. I know you're an expert at being on podcasts talking about Elm at the moment.
I've done a few.
Cool. Well, with that being said, keep spreading the jam.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for today. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, or if you'd like to suggest a topic, find us on Twitter at JAMstack Radio. To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library. It's packed with amazing talks on sales, marketing, product, and general management from founders of developer tools companies and other industry leaders.